You think you know what hell is? Try spending 18 hours in the cold, churning Pacific surf with the California sun beating down on you, while a man with a voice like gravel and a face like a clenched fist screams that you're worthless, that you're nothing, that your mother should have swallowed you. On your feet, Vance. The voice belonged to Master Chief Petty Officer Thorne. In the world of basic underwater demolition, SEAL training, also known as Buddy S, his voice was God, a cruel, unforgiving God. I struggled to get my legs under me. The damn sand was everywhere, in my eyes, my ears, my mouth. It felt like I was trying to stand up in a collapsing hourglass. My muscles screamed every fiber a white-hot nerve of agony. This was the 5th day of Hell Week, the point where boys break and men are forged, or so they told us. I didn't say think about IT. I said get up. Thorne was inches from my face. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. His eyes were pale blue chips of ice. I pushed, gritting my teeth so hard I thought they'd shatter. My swim buddy, a kid from Ohio named Miller, grabbed my arm and hauled. We were a team. You don't survive this alone. We finally staggered upright, a shivering, sand-caked monument to human misery. Thorne wasn't impressed. He paced in front of my platoon, his boots crunching on the wet sand of the Coronado beach. He looked like a shark that had learned to walk. You people make me sick, he spat. You call yourselves candidates for the world's most elite fighting force, but you look like a bunch of drowned rats. You think you have what it takes. You think you have the heart. He stopped directly in front of me. His eyes narrowed. He saw the chain. A thin, silver chain around my neck, tucked under my shirt. It was against regulations, a stupid, sentimental risk. With a flick of his wrist, he hooked a finger under it and yanked. The chain snapped. A small, tarnished brass compass fell into his palm. It was old, the glass cracked. It wasn't standard issue. It wasn't anything but a piece of junk to him. To me, it was the only thing I had left. What is this? Thorne's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. The screaming was bad. The whispering was worse. Master Chief, I started, my voice hoarse. Don't you Master Chief me, you little maggot. I asked you a question. What is this piece of trash? He held it up between his thumb and forefinger as if it were contaminated. It's a compass, Master Chief. A compass. He let out a dry, mirthless laugh. I can see it's a compass, Vance. I'm not an idiot. What I'm asking is, why is it here? Why are you carrying unauthorized gear in my training? I didn't have an answer, not one he would accept. How could I explain that it was the only thing I had from a life I barely remembered? The only link to the woman they told me was dead. My stepmother, Eleanor, her voice echoed in my head, cold and sharp as broken glass. Your mother was weak, Leo, sentimental. That's what got her killed. Don't you ever be like her. It helps me, Master Chief. I mumbled, find my way. Thorne's face went dark. It was the wrong thing to say. The absolute worst thing. He took a step closer, his shadow falling over me. Find your way, he hissed. Let me tell you something, Vance. If you need a toy to find your way, you don't belong here. We are the men who make the way. We are the compass. You are a liability. He turned to the rest of the platoon, his voice booming again. This is what weakness looks like. This is the cancer that we cut out. A man who can't trust his training, can't trust his brothers, because he needs to hold on to a goddamn trinket. My blood ran cold. This was it, the public execution. Vance, Thorne said, turning back to me. His eyes were devoid of all emotion. I think you know where the bell is. Go ring it. Get the hell off my beach. You are not, and you will never be, a Navy SEAL. My world stopped. The roar of the surf, the cries of the gulls, everything faded into a dull hum. All I could see was that brass compass in his hand and the smirk on his face. He thought he was breaking me. He had no idea I was already broken long before I ever got here. The house I grew up in wasn't a home, it was a museum. A cold, sterile gallery of my father's success. Richard Vance was a titan of industry, a man who measured life in quarterly earnings and stock prices. Everything in our sprawling San Diego mansion was perfect, untouchable, and silent. After my real mother supposedly died, that silence became deafening. I was 5. I remember fragments. A woman's laughter that smelled like the ocean. A hand that was always warm. A voice that sang me to sleep with songs about stars and sailing ships. Then nothing. One day she was gone. My father told me there had been an accident. A training flight gone wrong. She was a naval aviator, he said. A hero. He spoke the word hero like it was an illness. A few months later, Eleanor arrived. She glided into our lives on a cloud of expensive perfume and razor-sharp smiles. She was my father's business partner, and soon, his wife. She redecorated the house, replacing the few warm, personal touches with abstract art and cold, chrome sculptures. She erased every trace of my mother. And then she started on me. It was never a punch or a slap. Eleanor was too sophisticated for that. Her abuse was surgical precise. It was the constant, dripping poison of words. You have her eyes, you know, she'd say, looking at me with a faint disgust while she adjusted a diamond earring. That same reckless look, you must fight against that, Leo, it's a weakness. When my father was home, she was the perfect stepmother, doting, concerned, but the moment his car pulled out of the driveway, the mask would drop. Your father provides you with everything, and this is how you repay him. She'd hiss if I got a B on a test, with mediocrity. Your mother's blood runs thin in you. She was never good enough for this family, and neither are you. The compass was my only secret. I found it one day in the back of a dusty storage closet Eleanor had ordered cleaned out. It was in a small, wooden box with a few faded photographs she must have missed. Pictures of a smiling young woman in a flight suit holding a baby, me. On the back of one photo, a note was scrawled in elegant cursive for my little navigator. May you always find your way back to me. Love, Mom. I hid the compass. It became my talisman. Through the lonely years at boarding school, through the hollow congratulations at my graduation, it was my one tangible link to a love I could barely remember. It was proof that I wasn't just the product of Richard Vance's fortune and Eleanor Croft's ambition. I was someone else's son, too. Joining the Navy, applying for Bud AS, it wasn't about patriotism. Not really. It was an escape. It was a rebellion. Eleanor hated the military. She saw it as common, brutish. A place for people without options. You want to go roll around in the mud with them, she'd sneered when I told them. Richard, talk some sense into him. A Vance does not enlist. My father, as usual, just wrung his hands and looked away. The boy needs discipline, Eleanor. Discipline wasn't what I needed. I needed to prove her wrong. I needed to prove that the weakness she saw in me, my mother's blood, was actually strength. I chose the SEALs because it was the hardest thing I could find. A trial by fire so intense, it would have to burn away all her poisonous words. Or it would burn me to ash. Now, standing on that cold beach, with Master Chief Thorne's words hanging in the air, I felt the ashes starting to gather. The bell was waiting. A gleaming brass bell mounted on a wooden frame. 3 rings, and the pain stops. 3 rings, and you quit, you go home. But I had no home to go to. Thousands of miles away, in the sterile, climate-controlled quiet of the Pentagon, Vice Admiral Catherine Wallace stared at a list of names on her screen. She was the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, a 3-star admiral in a world dominated by men. She had a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, missed nothing. She was in her office, long after most of Washington, D.C. had gone home. The list on her screen was the current roster for Bud AS Class 325. Her official reason for reviewing it was a new directive on training attrition rates. Her real reason was a 26-year-old ache in her soul. Her finger traced down the list of names. Anderson Baker Diaz. Then it stopped. Vance, Leo J. Her breath caught in her chest. It couldn't be. Vance was a common enough name, but the birthdate next to it, it matched. The place of birth, San Diego Naval Hospital, it all matched. A ghost she had been chasing for more than 2 decades had suddenly appeared on a duty roster. She leaned back, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of her desk. The memories came flooding back, not as a gentle wave, but as a violent, crashing tsunami. Richard Vance, the handsome, charming heir to a logistics empire, he had swept her off her feet. A young, hotshot F-14 Tomcat pilot, she was everything his world of boardrooms and polo matches was not. At first, he'd loved it. He'd loved her uniform, her confidence, the faint smell of jet fuel that clung to her. Then Leo was born, and everything changed. Her career demanded long deployments. She was on the fast track, a rising star. When she was selected for an 18-month tour as part of a carrier strike group in the Persian Gulf, Richard had protested. "It's too dangerous, Kate. A mother belongs with her son. My son will have a mother who serves her country," she had argued. "He will be proud." It was the biggest fight of their marriage. She flew combat sorties. She wrote letters every day, sending pictures and cassette tapes with bedtime stories for a son she missed with a physical, gut-wrenching pain. When she came home, her world had been dismantled. Richard had filed for divorce while she was deployed. He'd hired a team of shark-like lawyers. They used her service against her. They painted her as an absentee mother, a thrill-seeker who chose danger over her own child. They produced a new woman, Eleanor Croft, a stable, wealthy, appropriate partner who could provide the home Catherine supposedly couldn't. And then, the final, unthinkable betrayal. They had somehow managed to get a judge, a friend of the Croft family, to terminate her parental rights entirely. They claimed she was a danger to the child. They sealed the records. They told her son she was dead. She had fought. Oh God, she had fought. She'd spent every dime she had on lawyers. She'd used every bit of her influence. But the Vances and the Crofts had more money and better connections. They buried her in legal motions. They got a restraining order. They vanished behind the high walls of their mansion. She'd lost, but she never gave up. She poured her grief and rage into her career. She climbed the ranks, promotion after promotion, captain, rear admiral, vice admiral. With every new star on her collar, she gained more power, more access. She had used private investigators. She had run searches every single year on his birthday. But they had hidden him well. Boarding schools in Switzerland, summers in the Hamptons. He was a ghost. Until now. Her son, her little navigator, was at Coronado, in the clutches of a man like Master Chief Thorne. A cold, hard resolve settled over her. The directive on training attrition rates was no longer a piece of bureaucratic paperwork. It was a weapon. She picked up the phone. "Get me a flight to San Diego," she told her aide. "Immediately. I'll be conducting a personal review of the Bud A.S. training program at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Inform the base commander I'll be on the ground in 6 hours." The hunt was over. It was time to bring her son home. The salt air of Coronado was a familiar balm to Admiral Wallace. She'd done some of her own early training here, a lifetime ago, but today, it felt different, charged. Every young man in uniform she saw, she wondered if it was him. Did he have her eyes? Did he have his father's smile? The base commander, a flustered captain who was clearly intimidated by the sudden appearance of a 3-star admiral, met her on the tarmac. "Admiral Wallace, this is an unexpected honor." "Let's dispense with the honor, Captain," Catherine said, her tone crisp and all business. "I'm here to observe. I want to see your training, raw and unfiltered. I want to see your instructors in action, and I want to review the files of every candidate in the current class." Her eyes swept the sprawling base. "Take me to the grinder." The grinder is the black heart of Bud A.S. It's a massive expanse of asphalt where the candidates do endless push-ups, sit-ups, and flutter kicks, often while being blasted with cold water from fire hoses. It's where dreams come to die. When she arrived, Class 325 was in the middle of a brutal PT session. Master Chief Thorne was prowling among the groaning bodies, his voice a constant, grating roar. Catherine watched from a distance, her admiral's gaze as sharp as a sniper's scope. She scanned the faces, grimy, exhausted faces searching. And then she saw him. He was in the front row. His form was starting to break, his arms trembling with exhaustion. But he wasn't stopping. There was a stubborn set to his jaw that was achingly familiar. She used to see that same expression in the mirror every morning. It was him, her son. A wave of emotion so powerful it almost buckled her knees, washed over her. She wanted to run to him, to hold him, to tell him everything. But she couldn't. He was a candidate. She was an admiral. And Thorne was watching. She turned to the captain, that instructor, Master Chief Thorne. "What's his reputation?" The captain shifted uncomfortably. "He's effective, Admiral, one of the best. He produces SEALs. His methods are traditional." "Traditional," Catherine repeated, the word tasting like acid. "I see." Later that day, in a temporary office they had set up for her, she reviewed the personnel files. When she got to Leo's, she saw the entry under next of kin, Father, Richard Vance. Mother, Eleanor Vance. The lie was right there, in black and white, a lie that had stolen her life. She needed to talk to him, to see if there was any spark of memory, any echo of her in his mind. She used her official review as a pretext. I want to conduct a few random interviews with the candidates, she informed the captain, to get their perspective on the training pipeline. Let's start with Seaman Vance. A meeting was arranged in a small, sterile briefing room. Catherine sat at the head of a long table, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times over 26 years. But it didn't happen. Just as Leo was being escorted to the room, Master Chief Thorne appeared. "Admiral," he said, with a nod that was barely respectful. "I apologize, but I have to pull Seaman Vance. His platoon is beginning a critical night navigation exercise. It's essential he participates." Catherine met his gaze. She saw the challenge in his eyes, the proprietary glare of a man who owned these candidates, body and soul. He was testing her. "Of course, Master Chief," she said, her voice smooth as silk, betraying none of the fury raging inside her. "The exercise is the priority." She watched them walk away, Thorne's hand resting on Leo's shoulder in a gesture that was not supportive, but possessive. Thorne saw Leo as a problem, and Catherine's sudden interest in him had just made it worse. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Thorne was going to try and break her son. And she was in a race against time to stop him. She returned to her office and made a secure call. "I need a favor," she said to an old friend in the Judge Advocate General's Corps, a big one. "I need you to pull a sealed family court record from San Diego, circa 26 years ago. The names are Vance and Wallace, and I need it yesterday." Then, she made another call, this one to a contact at a private lab. "I'm overnighting a sample for a priority kinship DNA test," she said. "I need the results the moment they're available, no matter the hour." She just needed the sample. The next day, she observed a training evolution that involved log PT. The teams had to carry massive, waterlogged telephone poles for miles. It was a soul-crushing exercise in teamwork and pain. During a brief water break, Catherine saw her chance. Walking over with the base captain, she spoke to the group, offering words of encouragement. While all eyes were on her, she casually picked up a discarded water bottle from the ground near where Leo was standing. "We need to do better with policing our gear, Captain," she said, handing the bottle to her aide. "See that this gets disposed of properly." The aide, who had been briefed, slipped the bottle into a sterile evidence bag. Catherine had the DNA. Now, all she could do was wait, and pray she wouldn't be too late. Master Chief Thorne knew something was wrong. An admiral doesn't just show up to watch Hell Week, and she certainly doesn't take a special interest in one particular screw-up candidate. He saw the way Admiral Wallace looked at Vance. It wasn't the look of a senior officer reviewing a subordinate. It was something else, something personal. And it infuriated him. But AS was his kingdom, a sacred place where he stripped men down to their raw essence and remade them into warriors. There was no room for politics or special treatment. Vance was already a borderline case in his eyes, too much of an internal, thinking man. The Compass incident had confirmed his suspicions. Vance was weak, he was a risk. And now, this admiral was interfering. Thorne decided to accelerate the process. He would weed Vance out, once and for all. He would design a test so brutal, so impossible, that Vance would have no choice but to quit. He would do it right under the admiral's nose, to prove that on this beach, his authority was absolute. The final phase of Hell Week was a series of grueling, multi-stage endurance tests. Thorne designed a special one just for Leo's boat crew. A 20-mile nighttime ocean paddle, followed by a cross-country land navigation course through the swamps and dunes of the backcountry, all while carrying their 100-pound inflatable boat. Before they started, Thorne addressed the platoon. He stopped in front of Leo. "Vance, give me the compass." Leo hesitated. "I said give it to me," Thorne growled. "You won't need it. Your map, your training, and your team are all you need. Any other tool is a crutch, and we don't allow crutches here." Reluctantly, Leo handed it over. Thorne pocketed it with a satisfied smirk. "Let's see how you navigate now, sailor." The hours that followed were a blur of pain and cold. The ocean paddle was against a relentless current. The land navigation course was a nightmare of thick mud, thorny bushes, and disorienting fog. Leo's team got lost, they argued, they started to fall apart. Miller, his swim buddy, was shivering uncontrollably, his lips blue with hypothermia. Leo had to take charge. He remembered the star charts his mother, the woman in the photographs, had taught him about in the stories he'd barely recalled. He found Polaris. He used the faint glow of the distant San Diego skyline as a reference point. He pushed his team, coaxing and bullying them forward. He carried Miller's pack in addition to his own for the last 2 miles. They stumbled across the finish line just as the sun was beginning to rise. They were the last team to finish, but they finished. They hadn't quit. They collapsed in a heap of exhausted limbs on the sand. Thorne was waiting for them. He wasn't smiling. Meanwhile, in her temporary quarters, Admiral Wallace's secured satellite phone buzzed. It was the lab. "Admiral, the results are in," the voice on the other end said. "It's a 99.999% probability. The maternal link is confirmed." Catherine closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, allowed a single tear to trace a path down her cheek. Confirmation, the final piece of irrefutable proof. At that exact moment, another call came in. It was her aide. "Admiral, you need to get to the main grinder. Now. Master Chief Thorne has Class 325 assembled. He's singling out Seaman Vance. It looks bad." Catherine was on her feet in a second, her admiral's cover firmly on her head, her face a mask of cold fury. The race was over. The entire class stood in formation on the grinder, shivering in the early morning chill. In the center, alone, stood Leo. He was covered in mud, his uniform torn, his body trembling from exhaustion and cold. Across from him, Master Chief Thorne stood, ramrod straight, radiating menace. This was a ritual as old as the SEAL teams themselves, a public culling. "Seaman Vance," Thorne began, his voice carrying across the silent asphalt. "You and your boat crew were the last to finish the exercise. You failed to maintain the proper pace. You failed to follow the prescribed route. You failed." He let the word hang in the air. "But your greatest failure wasn't on the course last night," Thorne continued, pacing slowly. "Your greatest failure is a lack of trust. In the training, in your teammates, in yourself." He pulled the small brass compass from his pocket and held it up for everyone to see. "It's this," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is your failure. This little toy, this crutch. You think it will guide you. You think it has some magic power. Let me tell you what it is. It's a symbol of your weakness. A sign that when things get hard, you won't look to the man next to you, you'll look to a ghost. To a memory, and that will get men killed." Leo stood there, saying nothing. He had nothing left. He had given every ounce of his strength, his will, his spirit on that course, and it still wasn't enough. "Navy SEALs don't hold on to ghosts, Vance," Thorne spat. "We bury them. You are not meant for this life. The bell is over there. I suggest you go and ring it." He tossed the compass onto the asphalt at Leo's feet. It landed with a pathetic little clink, the sound of finality. Leo stared at the compass, then at the bell. Maybe Thorne was right. Maybe Eleanor was right. He was weak. He had his mother's blood. He took a shuffling step toward the bell. "Master Chief Thorne." The voice cut through the air like a laser. Sharp, powerful, and utterly commanding. Every head snapped toward the source. Vice Admiral Catherine Wallace was striding across the grinder, her face unreadable, her 3-star insignia gleaming in the morning sun. The base captain scurried behind her, looking terrified. The entire class, including Thorne, snapped to attention. Catherine walked until she was standing between Thorne and Leo. She didn't look at her son. Her eyes were locked on the Master Chief. "Report, Master Chief," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "Admiral, I am conducting a performance review of a candidate who has failed to meet the standards," Thorne said, his jaw tight. "I see," Catherine said. She looked down at the compass on the ground. "And this is part of that review." "It is, Admiral. It's a piece of unauthorized, non-regulation gear that represents a critical failure in the candidate's mindset." Catherine stared at the compass for a long moment. Then she bent down, her movements fluid and precise, and picked it up. She turned it over in her palm. "It's a Mark I compass," she said, her voice still quiet, but now it held a new quality, a deep, resonant authority. standard issue to naval aviators and underwater demolition team members from 1942 to 1955, made of brass to be non-magnetic. Filled with kerosene to dampen the needle's movement, a piece of history. Thorn was silent, confused by this turn. Master Chief, Catherine continued, her eyes finally lifting to meet his. Are you familiar with the story of Commander Sully Sullivan during the landings at Incheon? Thorn blinked. Ma'am. Commander Sullivan led a UDT team on a covert reconnaissance of the mudflats. He got separated from his men in the dark. His modern equipment failed. You know what, he used to find his way back to the extraction point, allowing him to deliver the intel that saved thousands of lives. She held up the compass. He used his father's old Mark I compass, one he carried for good luck. A piece of non-regulation gear, a trinket, a ghost. A ripple went through the assembled candidates. Thorn's face was turning a blotchy red. He was being dismantled, piece by piece, by a woman who knew naval history better than he knew his own name. Tradition, Master Chief, is the bedrock of the teams, Catherine said, her voice rising now, filled with a righteous fire. Heritage, we stand on the shoulders of the men who came before us. We carry their legacy. To dismiss that, to call it a weakness, is not just an insult to this candidate. It is an insult to every man who has ever worn the trident. She took a step closer to Thorn, her eyes like blue flames. You are right about one thing. This compass is a symbol. It's a symbol of a promise. A symbol of a bond that can never be broken. A symbol of a legacy that this young man is trying to honor. She paused, letting her words sink in, letting the silence on the grinder become absolute. Then she looked at Leo, really looked at him, for the first time. And the cold, hard Admiral's mask dissolved, replaced by something infinitely more powerful. And I should know, she said, her voice cracking with 26 years of suppressed emotion. I'm the one who gave it to him. She turned back to the stunned Master Chief. Because Seaman Vance is my son. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if a bomb had gone off, but one that only destroyed belief, not buildings. The candidates stared, their exhausted minds struggling to process what they had just heard. Master Chief Thorn's face had gone from red to a sickly, pale white. He looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Leo just stood there, swaying on his feet. The words didn't make sense. My son. The world tilted, the horizon blurring. The Admiral, the powerful, imposing 3-star Admiral, was looking at him with an expression he had only ever seen in the faded photographs in a hidden box. Thorn, Catherine said, her voice now like ice, the Admiral firmly back in control. You are relieved of your duties as an instructor, pending a full investigation into your training methods and conduct. Captain, she snapped at the base commander, escort him to your office. He will speak to no one until I have spoken with him. Thorn, for the first time in his life, looked utterly defeated. He just nodded numbly and allowed himself to be led away. Catherine turned to the senior enlisted instructor. Petty officer, dismiss the class. Get these men to the mess hall and get them fed. Admiral, the command was given, and the stunned candidates shuffled away, whispering amongst themselves, their eyes wide with disbelief as they looked at Leo. Now, it was just the two of them on the vast, empty grinder. And a medical corpsman her aide had summoned. Get him to the infirmary, Catherine ordered. Treat him for hypothermia and exhaustion. Leo felt a corpsman's hands on his arm, guiding him, but his eyes were locked on Catherine. You, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. They told me you were dead. Catherine's composure finally broke. Her eyes filled with tears. That was a lie, Leo, one of many. I've been looking for you, for so long. In the warmth of the infirmary, wrapped in blankets, with a hot fur dripping into his arm, the story came out. Catherine sat by his bedside, her voice steady but filled with a deep, aching sadness as she unraveled 26 years of deception. She told him about her deployment, about Richard and Eleanor, about the court battle, the sealed records, the restraining order. She showed him copies of the legal documents her JAG contact had finally unearthed. The termination of her rights based on fraudulent claims. The official record of his adoption by Eleanor Croft. She erased me, Leo, Catherine said, her hand trembling as she held a document. They conspired to remove me from your life completely. And when I tried to see you at your school, from a distance they told you I was some crazy woman. A stalker, They poisoned you against me before you could even remember me." Leo listened, a storm of conflicting emotions raging inside him: anger, grief, confusion, but underneath it all, a strange sense of validation. The feeling of being an outsider in his own family, the constant, subtle cruelty from Eleanor, his father's emotional distance, it all suddenly made a horrifying kind of sense. He wasn't a flawed son, he was the captive son of a woman they hated. He looked at the compass, which Catherine had placed on the bedside table. "This was yours," he said, more a statement than a question. "It was my father's," she said softly. "He was a sailor in World War II. He gave it to me when I got my wings. I put it in your crib the day before I deployed. I wanted you to have a piece of our family, of your real family." A single tear rolled down Leo's cheek. "I always felt, I don't know, connected to it. Like it was the only real thing I had." "It was, Leo," she said, taking his hand. "It was." The news exploded, not in the media, not yet. Catherine kept it contained within the Navy's highest levels. But the fallout was swift. An official inquiry was launched. Master Chief Thorne was permanently reassigned to a desk job in Alaska, his career as a SEAL instructor over. The real battle, however, was just beginning. Armed with the original court documents and the DNA proof, Catherine's lawyers filed a lawsuit against Richard and Eleanor Vance that was the legal equivalent of a declaration of war. Fraud, conspiracy, parental alienation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The day Richard and Eleanor were served the papers, their perfect, sterile world shattered. Reporters began circling their mansion. Their powerful friends suddenly stopped returning their calls. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect family crumbled to dust. Leo, meanwhile, had a choice to make. He was offered a medical discharge. No one would blame him. After everything he'd been through, he could walk away. He spent a week recovering, talking for hours with the mother he never knew he had. He saw in her the same stubborn fire that had kept him going through Hell Week. He saw the strength Eleanor had always called a weakness. On the 7th day, he got dressed, walked out of the infirmary, and reported back to his platoon. His classmates stared at him. His instructors watched him. No one knew what to say. Leo walked to the front of the formation and stood at attention. "I'm here to train," he said, his voice clear and strong. He finished Buddy S, not because he was an admiral's son, but because he was his mother's son. He endured the rest of the brutal training, pushing himself harder than ever. He earned the respect of his teammates and his new instructors, not with words, but with action. He had found his true north. The day of Buddy S graduation was bright and clear. The sun glinted off the ocean, and a proud crowd of families and friends gathered to watch the men of Class 325 receive their tridents. Leo stood in his crisp dress whites, taller and leaner than when he'd arrived, his eyes clear and confident. When his name was called, he walked across the stage, shook the commanding officer's hand, and accepted the small, golden pin that marked him as a member of the world's most exclusive brotherhood. In the crowd, Vice Admiral Catherine Wallace watched, not as an admiral, but as a mother. For the first time, she was wearing civilian clothes, a simple blue dress. The tears in her eyes were not of sorrow, but of overwhelming pride. After the ceremony, they walked along the beach, away from the crowds. The same beach where he had almost been broken. Today, it felt like sacred ground. "I never thought this day would come," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "Neither did I," Leo admitted. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the brass compass. It was clean now, the brass polished to a dull shine. He held it in his palm. "This thing, it caused me so much trouble, but it also saved my life." "It didn't save you, Leo," Catherine said, stopping to face him. "It just pointed the way. You saved yourself. You had the strength inside you all along. You just needed to believe it." The legal battle had ended in a quiet, but total, victory. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Richard and Eleanor had settled out of court for an astronomical sum. Their social and professional ruin was complete, but that was a hollow victory. The real prize was standing right here, in a Navy uniform. Leo looked out at the endless blue horizon. "So what happens now?" "Now," Catherine said, putting an arm around her son's shoulders. "Now, you have a family. Now, you have a home to come back to. Always. A single cup of noodles, stolen out of desperation, can change a life." For Leo, it was a simple, tarnished compass. a small, forgotten object that held the key to his past and the map to his future. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the things we cling to in our darkest moments, the small symbols of who we are or who we hope to be, are more powerful than we could ever imagine. They don't just help us find our way, they lead us back to who we were meant to be all along. The journey for Leo and Catherine was just beginning, a lifetime of lost moments to reclaim. But for the first time, they were on that journey together. Today's story is a testament to the fact that truth and resilience can overcome even the most malicious lies. That the bonds of family, though they may be stretched and hidden, can never truly be broken. If this story of finding strength in the truth resonated with you, and you believe that everyone deserves to know where they come from, do me a favor and hit that like button. And subscribe to the channel for more stories that matter. And I want to ask you a question in the comments below. What is the compass in your life? What is that one thing, tangible or not, that has helped you navigate your own hell week? Share your story. Let's create a community of navigators. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.